All right, so stepping up to the plate, we have what do they call it? The fourth batter. What do you call it? The cleanup hitter. We got the cleanup hitter, Curtis Stone, in the room. How you doing, Curtis?
There we go.
Howdy,
So good,
howdy.
man. How are you?
Yeah, long time no see, man. You've been busy
I
for the
know.
past year. I've hit you up a couple times. You're always busy. You got a project. You're like next season, next season, and
Yeah,
now you got something percolating,
big
and
time.
you've been
Big time.
so it's time to you've been planting seeds. You've been taking care of keeping the weeds out of it, so to speak, and now you've got a harvest to bring to market. That's awesome.
Totally. In many ways. But yeah, man, I've been the homestead's cranking. I mean, we had a long winter. My snow is just finally melted. So I've been running around like a chicken with my head cut off out there, just fixing my driveway, getting ready for all these contractors that I'm going to start up here. But yeah, no, but I've spent a lot of time this winter looking at real estate. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you guys about today, because there's some interesting stuff going on, a lot of macro stuff. I only caught the tail end of that bit there with Russell Brand, but it was pretty funny. And I think he's onto something in that there's just so much noise and they want you to just double down on this Trump thing, right? They just
Yeah.
want you to, they wag this carrot and they want you to jump in with this Trump thing. Meanwhile, there's all this madness going on and the whole agenda has not slowed down.
They want you to think
But
the white noise is the signal. They want you to tune into the chaos and the bread and circus, and don't keep an eye on your domicile and how you get food and your communication with other people and how you stay alive, and maybe
yep.
avoid what they're planning for other people as far as like greater depression. They're going to outdo themselves, I think.
It's crazy, man. I mean, we'll talk a bit more about my thing, but I wouldn't mind just shooting the breeze with you a bit on this. But it is crazy how ever since the COVID lockdowns, it just went accelerated like crazy. And for people who weren't paying attention, it seemed like there was a reprise, like it kind of slowed down. But for people like us who are paying attention, it's just continued.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what it's like for you in your state, but I mean, the geoengineering has been off the chains. I've been watching geoengineering. I've been awake to it for at least 15, maybe almost 20 years. And I'm telling you, I mean, up here in Canada, in British Columbia, it's insane. I've got friends all over the US that are saying the same thing. And it's just like, how is it that nobody's talking about that? How is it that there's this insane, and we know, remember the Project Veritas leaks that talked about CNN saying, hey, after the COVID thing, we're going to go full steam ahead with climate change. And so now, I mean, what's it like for you guys where you're at? Are you seeing this all the time?
Yeah, I mean, when I grew up, I grew up near an airport, and you see planes fly over, and they didn't have a persistent type of trail that like made the whole sky hazy. But these
Yeah.
days, whether it's changes in the fuel or what nuance it is, it's definitely a different phenomenon, right? And then you look into, so you notice a phenomenon. You're like, maybe there's something to it, maybe there's not. And then you get into technical papers. Oh, they've been working on geoengineering since the 1940s. And what type of sources are available? Smithsonian Museum, National Geographic, like the standard history publications of that time covering these types of projects, right? And then you got Gates with his plan to like, let's block
Yep,
out the
exactly.
sun, and vitamin D has nothing to do with your health. And like these things have a cumulative effect. And Bill Gates' little investments in all these different places, you can't just look at those. You have to say, what's the entire investment package add up to? Oh, he's got little trackers for under your skin, because I thought that was a rumor, but no, Microsoft Corporation does have a patent on such things, right? With the needle, the nano needle delivery mechanism and all that sort of stuff. So when you look at their whole thing, it's like, oh, I don't know what it adds up to. But then if you add on a little knowledge of eugenics and their family's role in eugenics, and you're like, oh, I see what's going on.
Yeah. Well,
it's just,
and you look at just the controlled demolition of the Western. It's not even just the controlled demolition of the United States. It's the controlled demolition of Western civilization as we know it. It's happening
and
right
human
now.
immune systems. So like the whole planet's involved at this point.
Yeah, it's just an all-out assault. It's, at least according to my eyes, from what I can see in the sky, it looks like to me this ramped up after the COVID mania. when like it seems like this is just like the next thing to launch us into climate change, impending doom. The sky is falling. Let's get big government to fix it, even though we're the ones doing it, right? I mean, like even here in British Columbia, there was like testimonies, hundreds of testimonies of when the wildfires happened 2 years ago, that the government literally stopped loggers and ranchers and farmers that had equipment to go and just cut out fire breaks, and they stopped them from doing it. And then they said, then the media the next day says, oh, we couldn't get there in time. It's like, and you're seeing these patterns all over the place, and it's crazy, man. And I mean, I think, you know, what is the solution, right? There's so many things. When you look at all this stuff, it can be so overwhelming. And what is the solution? And I don't know if there is a single solution. I certainly don't think there is. I think there's solutions for people, and your context will have a lot to do with it. But I think overall, if people can get out of areas that are highly populated, that is going to be a thing that could have the most compounding effect on your well-being going forward. When I think about where this economy is going, and what, you know, look at the cities, like look at the crime rates. I mean, even in medium-sized towns in Canada, like Kelowna right now, which is my hometown, has the highest crime rate in Canada. Like what? It's nuts. And it's, you know, you just look at all these things going on. When the economic system starts to kind of unravel, follow its logical conclusion, we see more of these food shortages, these supply chain breakdowns, stuff like this. If you're in a place where there's a lot of people and times get tough, you're really competing with a lot more people. I mean, that's really just the simplest way to put it. And
well, it's like Mad Max.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, I mean, I pray that never happens, and I don't know if it will. Who knows, right? But in the last couple of years, like when the lockdowns happened, there was a ton of people that fled the cities. I mean, I fled the city. I was what people called a COVID buyer. Our
well, you were
realtors
known as the urban farmer.
That's right.
You had to change your brand and everything because of the pandemic.
I changed everything because this is not sustainable for me. I can't be an urban farmer anymore, right? I mean, I stopped doing that business a while ago, to be honest, because I had a career as a speaker and a consultant and all that. But I even didn't want to even associate with the brand anymore, because it was like, I don't want people to live in cities. I think cities are a relatively short-term experiment in civilization, and I don't know how sustainable they are, even in terms of us being in the same place as that many people. Like, you're familiar with that study with the rats. What was the guy's name who did that one?
John Calhoun.
Yeah, John Calhoun did the Rockefeller rat studies.
That's right, the Rockefeller rat study.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. How it just turns into its logical conclusion, and you stack in liberal policies and cultural degeneracy, and then
the last generation of the rats was like preening and grooming itself at the expense of even eating and doing the things it needed to survive.
Exactly. It's like
it totally just collapses on itself. Yeah. And they're like, we want that on a bigger scale. Make it happen.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's it. And so, I mean, anyways, I was one of these COVID buyers that got out, and I'm so glad we did, because, oh my goodness, life is so much better in the country. And there's a lot of people that have left cities. And so there's actually a lot of, fairly awake people per capita out in these areas. And we're seeing this sort of resurgence of these smaller communities across Canada. And I'm sure it's the same in the US, but I wanted to share with people, because, in my urban farming journey and all that, I actually did the least amount of my farming in urban scenarios, at least as far as teaching and consulting and helping people build farms. It was always in the country, because that's just where most farms are. There's actually very few urban farms, and they produce an insignificant amount of food for the sort of global food supply, I call it. But I've been in the country, and I have an interesting story about, kind of how I got here and how this can help people. Because I think, like I said, you can learn the law, you can change your political scenario, moving to a different state that has different politics. You can do all kinds of different things to change your sort of situation in life. But by and large, in a shit hits the fan scenario, call it, being away from large amounts of people is simply just the easiest thing to do to change. And so with my place here, we got a crazy deal on this property, and we bought it during the mania of the COVID buyers. And I got this place for a third to almost a quarter, no, not a quarter, about a third to half of other places we were looking at comparatively. And the reason I got it so cheap is that I observed something in the geography that nobody else did. And most people wrote the property off because they didn't think there'd be water there. But I observed that based on these two draws that I could see that had deciduous trees and that were, you know, little valleys, that there would be a significant amount of snow shed there. And it turns out I've got so much snow shed here that I can move into these valleys that I can harvest about 10 million liters of water and hold it. And which is incredible when you're doing regenerative agriculture or just homesteading in general. And so I spent the winter building this course on how to teach people how to read the landscape and how to look for land, because and it's kind of funny, I basically built the course because I just wanted to teach this to people. I wanted to have taught this to people for a long time. I used to do it as a consultant. People would just pay me $400 an hour and send me a handful of properties and say, hey, can you just tell me what you think of these? And I'd do it. I'd use Google Earth Pro, and I could do that. I could source climate data and whatnot. I knew how to do the analytics to come up with a good evaluation on a place. But I don't have time to do that anymore because I'm developing my own place. And I also see a massive opportunity in real estate. And so I built this course. And during the process of me building this, I did this all winter. I discovered, basically what the course is we profile properties. I look at properties across North America and pretty much every Canadian province and almost every American state in the continental US. And I analyze them going through this framework of metrics that I use that I can explain further too. But just to get to this point, I looked at hundreds of properties to pick 50 to analyze. And so we analyze these 52 properties. We do this full process, and there's about 30 hours of content in this course of me doing this to show people how this works. I discovered that out of all the listings in the United States, so we're looking at homestead type properties, like generally speaking, 10, 15 acres or more, sometimes up to 200 acres. Some with a home, sometimes they're raw land, just basically anything under $350,000 US and larger acreage that would be suited for homesteading. So it has water, it's got good geography and potential areas for farming and whatnot. And a third of the properties I looked at were 200 days or more on the market. Okay. The other third were 100 days or more on the market. And the other third were over 52, which is the average days on the market in the US. But realtors play this trick where they unlist it and then relist it again. And then they can start.
But you can see that in the history. So I see what you're doing there. You're doing a little arbitrage because you know the longer these properties sit on the market, the worse it is for the property owner and the seller and these sort of things. And by using some methods to sift through, you can find those more readily, and you're saving people a lot of time. So
totally,
that's good.
But but the thing is, the opportunity here is that the market has gone a bit sideways. It hasn't tanked yet. We all know that it will probably fairly soon. However, there's so much on the market right now, and part of the reason is because during the COVID lockdowns, all these people went out and bought properties. And then things for normies kind of normalized. Like the people that were buying these properties weren't people listening to the Grand Theft World podcast. I don't think it was just a lot of people that were just inconvenienced by the social distancing and masking, and are like, I don't like this. Let's go somewhere else for a while. And they went out, and there must have been almost a dozen properties that I looked at in R50 that were literally, you could tell they were COVID buyers that went out, set up a bunch of stuff really quick, and then just dumped it. And now these properties are sitting on the market at, I wouldn't say cheap prices, but they're sitting at a lot of days on the market. And even some of the properties we profiled, we noticed the price had slidden from the time we first logged it into our database and then looked at it again, that had gone down 60,000. Some of them went down 100,000. And so all it's going to take is a little blip in the market. And then all of a sudden, there's going to be this huge opportunity that if you have a bit of cash, and maybe you can cooperate with some people to get a property. Maybe you can say to your parents, look, do you want to be around? Do you want to be around us? Because we're getting out. And I'm already seeing a lot of this, like parents are helping out people, and they're find a way, right? That when this opportunity comes, there's going to be a lot of stuff available, but your biggest competition is going to be two things. It's going to be one, it's going to be other people wanting to get out. And two, it's going to be the big banks. because you'll own nothing and be happy, at least in my opinion. I think the way they're going to really implement that is just through straight up predatory crony capitalism that we've seen before. We saw it in 2008, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So anyway, so I basically put this course together that I'd like to share with your audience, and you'll have a link in your, I think you have a link right in your.
It's grandtheftworld.freedomfarmers.com.
That's right. Yeah. So there's going to be an early bird discount that'll run from the 15th to the 18th. And the course is so cheap, like it's not even worth an hour of my time. Let me put it to you this way, that I really just want as many people in our community. And I've gone and talked to a number of podcasts in this community, that people, if they're not out yet, this might be the last chance when we see this next big market correction and this big sliding of assets, which could be when the US dollar goes, it could be everything in US dollars goes too, which could be almost every asset.
US dollar already went. It only affects us when people realize that.
Exactly. When all those dollars come home to roost is when and I'm no economist either, but I'm a guy who can just look at things and figure out some common sense. When I'm looking at properties on the market, hundreds of them, and I can see that a significant amount, 2/3 were over 100 days, and they're just sitting there. And
it's going to get worse. So
way worse.
The opportunity is properties are there. Opportunities to buy them are going to come up. Now, if you have a little money, the barrier is you don't know how to pick a property, right? I don't know how to read the terrain. So I'm a soft buyer. If you don't have a well and some electricity and some sort of internet, it takes too long. I need business continuity.
And that's
but if you can say, oh, we can get a well here, or we can make a water collection point, or we can set up a pond and these sort of things, that gives people opportunities to work that property that other buyers don't even have on their radar. And that's figure out how to make a property, pay for itself.
Yeah, and my whole thing is, I'm the off grid. I'm off grid now, and my whole thing is showing people how to do that. And if you want to be off grid and you want to be less shakeable when this thing starts to really shake out, you need to have your own water source.
Yes,
you need to have some kind of I'm not going to sit here and propose that everybody become agrarians. I know that's just not realistic. However, to have something that can help you when you can't get anything else, or at least being in a network, or whether it's stored food or not, but if you can get on land and just be out of the mayhem, that alone is simply worth something. If you got your own water source, you got a little bit of gardening, you got enough room on your property to have a nice sized root cellar, so that you might not grow everything right away, but if you're going to store food for a significant amount of time, you need space. It isn't just a closet in an apartment. You need to have probably 8 by 10, 6 foot high space to store a significant amount of food. Big bulk bags of stuff like that, canned goods. You need to have a lot of space. And, just being out of the mayhem will make you last longer, because if you're in the mayhem, it's going to be loot and pillaging. And we've seen this in history. I mean, if you want to see what proverbial shit hits the fan looks like right now, just look at Haiti. Look at some countries right now. There's a great YouTuber named Indigo Traveler. This guy does unbelievably intrepid adventures to the most dangerous places in the world, and you can see what shit in the fan looks like. It's out there. I mean, you go to Haiti or what are some of these other countries like South Sudan? It's just absolute violence and mayhem all the time. The minute you leave the house, you're in trouble. And hopefully we don't get there. Hopefully that none of that happens. But I'll tell you what, I'd rather be safe than sorry.
Yeah, and I'd rather look at it than look for it during those times. So
yeah, exactly. I'd rather
look at it and
not be in it.
Yeah, I don't want to figure out how to escape New York. That's not a good situation.
Oh, goodness. Well, that's the thing. If you're waiting till the last minute to get out, you're not getting out, because everybody else is getting out at the same time. That means it's gridlock traffic. You're going on foot, or you better have a dirt bike or something,
Or wait till 3 days into it until, you know, if you wait a week, they'll be organized. But if you wait 3 days, they'll get the soft ones. Everyone will be satiated and you can sneak through.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, wait for that opportune moment. That's probably what I would do. If I was stuck in the city, I would hunker down for a little while and just wait till the dust settled a bit and then slide out before, you know, when the mayhem.
If we were in the city,
ensues a
we'd
little
slide
bit.
out first. You know that. We'd be the early. We'd know about it early.
We'd be gone. But yeah, no, basically, so what I do in this course is I use Google Earth Pro to zero in on places. And so, yeah, this is the lead page. So people can just go there and
Yeah,
put
if
in
I
their,
talk, it'll come up on screen like that. Find the perfect property.
there you go. Yeah.
If you want a
find the perfect
homestead, or sometimes
property.
they have houses on them too. You could still read the terrain of if it had a structure on there, right?
Well, that's just it. And that's
Yeah.
what we do, because it's actually when you're looking for property, it's actually better to not just look for raw land. And I get people that say to me all the time, well, Curtis, I got a tiny house or an RV and we want to eventually build. It doesn't matter. Just look for acreage and with or without a home, because then you'll get more options. Like our place, like originally I was looking for raw land because that's what I wanted to do. But we actually found that we had more options around the same price points to find places with homes. Yeah, this is not the Shangri-La. We're not looking for a house that's a perfect place. We just want, I'm interested in the land, and you can retrofit a house or you can build another one. But I would actually suggest to people to not try to build right now. I mean, I'm building and it's insane. Like,
Yeah.
I'm so far into it now that I'm not going to turn around.
Unless you're going to have a sawmill and do it yourself type of thing, then you can have at it. Right now is actually a good time to do that. But if you want to do new construction, permits and contractors and building supplies are all on the scarce list right now.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah. But anyway, so I show people how to read the landscape, and we kind of go through this framework that has 13 pieces to it, really. And the first thing that I show people, and I give the framework away for free, because the value in my course is in the consults of reviewing the properties, where it's like 30 hours of me doing it.
For sure.
We draw lessons from each one. So I didn't just go and pick a bunch of random properties and just like, okay, let's go look at a bunch of. We took a lot of time to pick these properties, and they went through several filters before they even came to me. And so we go through this framework, and the first thing is an individual, if you're going to start looking for land, the first thing you have to understand is what your context is. What do you want to do? What do you want to achieve? What's negotiable for you? What's not negotiable for you? You know, not negotiable for me is I don't want to live anywhere near a cell tower. I don't want to live anywhere near big ag. I don't want to live anywhere near some kind of, oil and gas development where my groundwater is, I'm going to change the screen here. My groundwater is contaminated or something like that. I don't want to be in any kind of risky situation. So first, understanding those negotiables, non-negotiables is the key thing. And
so
then the second thing
disasters, and then there's the man-made disasters, and you got to kind of watch out for both, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. But ultimately, you have to have your context through the lens in which you look at everything, so that, because you'll get realtors involved when you're looking for property and stuff like that. And they'll kind of steer you sometimes, and because they want to make a buck too, right? So you really need to be like solid on a foundation of what you want and how that's going to look. And that really means sitting down with your spouse or your partner, whoever, and kind of writing this stuff down and almost making like a synopsis to a book or something of what the perfect property looks like for you. And then make a list of what's negotiable and what's non-negotiable. So, I wanted to be on a south-facing slope, but I didn't have to be on a south-facing slope. So it was negotiable. It wasn't negotiable for me to be on a north-facing slope. That's just, there's no possible way. So basically, give people that. Then the next thing when you kind of pick some properties you want to look closer at, is the first thing you do is look for threats. So what's a threat outside of the property? How close are you to a highway? How close are you to any kind of industry? What do the neighbors' properties look like? What are they doing? Look for things that would be just a red flag to disqualify, because the best way to find a winning property is to just churn through the most and analyze them effectively, so you come to like reasonable, good conclusions, and you disqualify them or you put them onto your next list. But you want to just crank through as many to see as much stuff as you can to pick the best things. And so then once you eliminate threats, then you go through this process, and we use this it's called the scale of permanence. And it was invented by a guy who's kind of a Renaissance man named P.A. Yeoman. I don't know if you guys ever come across his work.
No.
You might be interested in his stuff, but yeah, he's a really interesting Australian engineer, farmer, just kind of a guy who did all kinds of things. And he came up with this system of evaluating land, and it starts at climate, geography, water, socioeconomics, access and circulation, microclimates, soil, buildings and infrastructure, aesthetics and experience. Basically, going through all
reverse of how most people do it.
Exactly. No, it is. It is actually. It actually is. But the reason it goes in that order is that climate is the first thing you need to look at and fully understand where that place is and what the climate is, because the climate is the thing that you just really can't change.
Right.
There's little you can change about it.
Yeah.
And
but
that's
the
why
aesthetics and the structure and all these other things you can change.
Exactly. And so that's why he called them the scales of permanence, because they get less permanent the further you go down. So at the top, you're at the most permanent thing, climate. That's very difficult to change that. You can greenhouses, you can do some things to affect the climate, all at a high cost. And then geography, similar. You can change the geography. I've certainly done it on my property. It's expensive, but you can do it. And then water too. I mean, if there's water there, easy. I was able to identify water here, and I wanted to do this big project, but we drilled a well and we have incredible water on the top of a mountain. But so you go through all of these things, and then what we show people how to do is use this point system to basically just create a report card, basically I'm not talking, you're not going to do this to 100 properties. When you look for 100 properties, you're going to filter that down to like 10 maybe, and then really take a deep dive on those. Do all of this from your desk, and then filter that down to maybe one or two that maybe you'll go and view. And then as you do this, you'll just pick, you'll spend less time driving around looking at properties. And then when you go to look at a property, it'll most likely be a winner or a strong maybe, opposed to, most people just go in the listings and then they're calling and they're looking at the house mostly, and then they're just going around and they don't really know what they're doing. And the risk to this, the risk and reward with this is that if you do it right the first time, you win for the long run. But if you do it wrong the first time, now you're stuck with a property that has a major problem that is either going to cost you a lot to fix, or you're not going to fix it and you're just going to get rid of it. Well, now you got to do that. And so my hope is with this course is that I can give people enough of an understanding to basically look at a property and pick a winner, and then it's one move and you're done. Because I really believe that the time for us to get out of these crazy liberal hellholes is running out. And I mean, look at these 15-minute cities and stuff, and and I'm not trying to freak people out. I mean, I just legitimately want to help people. Yeah, it's reality. Yeah.
So you're talking about like a family legacy type of operation, right? Because what you're talking about is probably a lot of work. So you're going to need a nice vision for the whole family to see. It's like, if you want a place where we're having picnics and, the grandkids are coming over and these sort of things, like you have to build it now to have it later. You can't just hope it's going to be there,
Yeah.
And you would want, fruit forest and permaculture and aquaponics. You'd want to kind of build all these things in, and it could be an example for other people and other, neighbors and whatnot. So self-reliance, security for the family, these sort of things are good. But that's not what motivates people. What motivates them is like to have that legacy type property where the whole family can get together and be out in nature and learn how the world works. This is how we get milk from the cow, and this is what, where the goats, if you don't tie them up, they're going to chew through your stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's a good way of putting it too, because that people can relate to that. At the same time, that takes a lot of time and effort to do that. And hopefully people will do that. But I think even in the short term, even if it's a plan B or something to get a place to go, or, and just the nice thing about the United States is that there's so many options. This is one thing I'm somewhat jealous about in the US, is that there's so many different states, and the US has such an unbelievably diverse set of climates. There's, whether you look at, the Central Valley of California to
Yeah.
Big Sur, California, very different. Northern California, it's totally different. Oregon, Washington, very different on the east and the west side. Then you got this whole, the whole Badlands part that goes through the U.S. from Colorado down Moab, even Wyoming and Montana are this sort of desert, high desert climate. Then you get into on the eastern seaboard, and things by the Mississippi really change. They really green up, and there's just so many beautiful places in the US, and with the US going to shit too, that the fact that there's some states that are, a little bit more accommodating to freedom-minded people is really nice. And, Americans have the luxury to be able just to pick. Like, you could be living in upstate New York. I mean, I got to get out of here. And you could be thinking, hey, you know what? Why don't we go down to, part of Texas? Let's go to Oklahoma. Let's go to, let's go somewhere down there, like get out of the insanity. Even the West Coast isn't bad. I mean, I know people don't like the politics in Washington State, but Washington State's not very different from the politics where I am. But when you're in the country, you don't really see the politics,
Yeah.
Like you go northeastern Washington, which I think is one of the most opportunist, the biggest opportunities right now of real estate of all the places I viewed in the US. Northeastern Washington, unbelievable opportunities, just cheap. Nobody in the US wants to live there because there's a lot less amenities up there. You have to be prepared to drive if you want to get, the closer to the Canadian border, the cheaper it is, and you get insane acreages. I mean, I looked at some homesteads that were literally prepper properties that people built and then took off, and you're like, this is a turnkey model. You could just slide right in here. You got gardens, you got a house, you got a well, you got a power system. Like, some of these places are even off grid. And there's just, I don't know where I'm going with that, but
I don't think people
a lot of
understand,
opportunity.
like, even if you lived in a like, whether you live in a red state or a blue state, once you live out someplace rural, the only thing your state has to do with you is the taxes, the mandates, and the law enforcement. Other than that, it doesn't matter if you live in a red state, blue state, because you're out in the middle of nowhere.
That's exactly
and if you live in the country and you go to the country store, you're probably going to bump into people who know a great deal about the world, but not so much detail. They're very smart about how the world really works. They're not fooled like the city folk.
Yeah.
You know?
And they're down to earth.
Yeah.
And there's no income tax in Washington State. I mean,
That's right.
That's kind of cool for a leftist state. I mean, wow, that's kind of interesting. But no, I mean, there's a lot out there right now, and there's going to be so much more out there, because like it's a similar situation in Canada too, as far as those same metrics of real estate. It's just way more expensive here, but there's a lot of stuff been sitting on the market for even longer here, and there's just no way it's selling. And so we're in a situation here too, where the mortgages are in 5-year terms. So if you get a 25-year mortgage here or a 30-year mortgage, they renegotiate the interest every 5 years. I mean, if you thought a mortgage was a big enough scam already, which it is, put that into the mix. And then we have people that bought properties in the last few years at the peak of the market, right? Like you would see some of the price points up here and you would just be shocked, because it's about a third to a quarter of this in the US for the same thing, adjusted for the dollars too. And all these people bought these properties at also peak of the market, record low interest rates, and now those interest rates are continuously climbing up. And so there's really only a year or two in the last batch of 5-year mortgage cycles where people are really going to start sweating. And once because interest rates here are almost 7% now, and it's continuously climbing. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to look at the chart and go, yeah, I think it's going this way.
Well, and in a similar period back in like 2008, it was like 18% interest. So correlation between these depreciations in value and the increase in interest. That's what they do to try to make it buoyant to the market.
Well, yeah, and that's how the bankers continuously get richer, is they give out cheap money so that all the peasants go and build up an asset, because the rich know that their money's not worth anything. They're smart enough for that, and they get the peasants to go and work for that money and then build an asset and then throttle interest and inflation and then make those peasants poor and then take their stuff, right? And that's unfortunately what's going to happen with all of this. But it's crazy, because like I said, when I set up to build this course, my objective was, and hadn't looked at all the stuff yet to come to these conclusions, but after looking at hundreds of listings across the entire continent, there's some patterns in there that are really easy to see. And it's like, okay, wow. I mean, surely I can't be the only one noticing this. You listen to these guys like Robert Kiyosaki and stuff. I mean, they've been talking about this kind of stuff for a long time, but it's easily observable. And these days, I'll tell you, the only thing I really trust are my own eyes, because the propaganda and the messaging is so radical and so continuous and subversive that it's hard to believe anything anymore.
Well, plus now with the AI and all that sort of stuff, it makes it even harder to discern fact from fiction and content on the internet. Nature's a little bit easier. They have some snakes that look like each other. They got some tricky stuff in nature, don't get me wrong, but it's not as complex as what they have going on. Now, my question is, on the other side of Chat GPT, aka Hal, have you figured out how to use it to evaluate properties and like feed it realtor.com and like find my property? What's the prompt for that?
I have played around with ChatGPT though, and I asked it some legal questions, and it did blow my mind early on. I mean, maybe a few months ago. But I can guarantee you that when the big move happens and we start equity and stuff like that to depreciate, you can guarantee that BlackRock's going to be employing some AI to go and scoop up the best property.
Let's get it first. Let's do it before BlackRock. So it looks like this. You take your course right here, right? And we get a transcript. We drop that in the AI and then say, now apply this as your new rule set to go feed on the realtor.com and Zillow and things like that.
Yep.
And then to bring you hot properties. And then you can match that up with good investors who have these qualifications and they want to move their family to some place, and you can have a real service there. And that could take a percentage of the house price or the property price.
It could be. And to be totally honest,
type of real estate.
I thought about
You're like a new type of realtor.
Yep.
Whole different toolkit. They can't even compete with you. What?
Yep. No. Yep. Well, I'd rather just disseminate that information to the people and just let them collectively, outcompete these assholes.
See, he's like, I'd like to get back to my garden, and this is how I do it without, feeling like I'm not letting the wisdom out. So you're like, I got to move on with my work, but before I do, here's this really useful thing that I figured out, and let it be useful for you. And yeah. That's a good idea. I'm glad you brought it to fruition and it didn't linger on some to-do list someday, maybe.
I know it was that. And then my partners kind of lit a fire under my ass. And our winter was so epic here that it was actually the perfect time to do it, because we just had so much snow. And my wife and I and my kids, we all ski and snowboard and stuff, and we like the winter, but yeah, we had 5 months of winter, man. It snowed November 4th and the snow never went away, and it's just melted now. So I had the time to do it, and I'm glad I did. And I really hope that people will seize this opportunity, because, and I'm not putting this out. I'm putting this out now while the shit hasn't hit the fan, so that you can sharpen your sword before you run into battle, and not do. And this is the thing too about prepping too, that I say to people all the time, is so many people just wait for the last moment. It's like everybody's running to Costco in the panic. It's like, you do not want to be in the panic when the panic happens. You want to be ahead of the panic and be making nice, easy, concise moves and avoid the insanity.
Yeah, you want to set up so if there is another lockdown or something like that, you could just do some family projects on the property, and no one even really. So a good example of this was back in the 1920s and 30s, they were doing all this logging expansion out in like Wyoming and Idaho. And I watched a documentary one time on how they got those big trees from those big mountains all the way down to the places where they processed it. And then you learn about the people who built like the log jam, canals for them to float down, all the crazy stuff that these people had to do to get these trees down off the mountain. So it was fascinating to start with. And then I remember them saying, what was it like during the Great Depression? And they're all like, we didn't even know it went on at the time. We heard about it afterwards, right? From travelers. Because to them, there was no change in their life or their lifestyle or the ability to get amenities, because they were already out in the bush in a, kind of very frontiersy type place.
Exactly. And I've heard a lot of those stories, and there's a lot of doom and gloom in the prepper and truther space too. Everybody, they're going to get you eventually. And people love to say that. I think that's just because people love to make up excuses for themselves.
They're going to get you how?
And it's easier to just kind of sound virtuous and say that than it is to actually do the work and take responsibility. But I'm optimistic about things. I mean, it is crazy when you, like I said, we started talking about the geoengineering and all this insane stuff that's going on. Maybe there's a calm before the storm. Maybe it's darkest before the dawn, you know? And I don't know. I have faith in Americana. I have faith in, you know, good people that are just, they want to do good for their family and build themselves up and strive for something. And I think it's just going to get to a time where if we don't start separating ourselves en masse, the degeneration and the demoralization is going to be very hard to keep up with. Like, especially when they stack in scarcity, when they stack in, because we've seen a bit of that, right? We've seen some events over the last number of years where we've seen these waves of people freaking out. And when you put all the other insane stuff that's going on into the mix and you're surrounded by that, I mean, geez, it's got to be tough. Like, just watching your podcast and you keeping up to date with things going on around the world, I go, every time we watch, my wife and I watch your show and we watch whatever stuff, this Alex Jones, and we pay attention to Jay Dyer, and we just sit there and go, I'm so glad we're not in it anymore. Because when we lived in Kelowna, I was literally seeing Drag Queen Storytime. Like, it was actually in my hometown, and the insane liberals are just going more unhinged. And it's like, I don't want to see it anymore. The tent city in my hometown, which used to be this really wicked working class bootstrap entrepreneur town, the tent city is many blocks long. And this is like, you know, 140,000 people in this town. I mean, it's a medium-sized city. And it's just, this is happening everywhere though. I mean, the things that I'm talking about in my city, in my old city, are happening everywhere, all around the world. And how long can you put up with it? Because if we don't keep our spirits high during this, I think it's going to really start to wear people down. And I think getting on the land is one way that, I mean, you're on land, Richard. You mean, you know what it's like. I see your videos with your son, you know, you go out in the woods and stuff. Like, this is soulful. Like, that's a spiritual experience, to be in nature and to be mystified by God's creation and be out there experiencing it and also being productive in it. This is I think what's going to get a lot of people through what we're going through, because I don't see this whole thing stopping anytime soon.
It's like the ability to leave the movie theater while the movie's going on for everybody else, right? You need to be exposed to you need to know what's going on, but we have the ability to, like, oh, look, here's nature, and it's always on, and it's always interesting, and it's never you know, Defense Department propaganda. You know, the trees just grow there, and you don't have to you just have to discern predators out there and other pitfalls and perils.
But there's an inherent healing component to it. In the sense, to your point, Curtis, like, it's a situation whereby which individuals, there's so much free floating anxiety, there's so many pressures on them living the rat race of the sort of normie lifestyle in a major city around the United States or in Canada, or, you know, even in Central America. Same issue happens when you cram people together and then create supply lines that are just in time, that are just to make it as efficient as possible, when it takes one wrong event to happen, which happened to us. Like, because I agree with everything what you're saying, Chris, because 10 years ago, we had an ice storm, if you remember that up there. And I remember within 4 days, I witnessed people
fighting at the gas station
over trying to get gas for generators, and we couldn't get out of the state.
Where was this one, Tony?
This was in Connecticut.
This is in Hartford.
Yeah, we had a similar thing in Montreal. It was
like 2011 or something like that. 2012.
It was October of like 2012 or something like that.
Yeah,
and
right.
I mean, I saw society.
The leaves were still on the trees,
like
and that's what caused all the damage. So everything was out. And for the first day or so, people were like, oh, they'll light candles. But by day 3, 4, like, there was tension everywhere because nobody was getting their needs met.
There's no electricity. Yeah.
They're all uncomfortable, you know.
You can't really get out of the state. The roads are a disaster.
No, you can't get out.
Yeah. There's so much debris and damage. Yeah. It was so just to your point about, and that's minor compared to the multi-dimensional sort of warfare going on, the air, the food, the water, the mind, for the soul. It's total
it.
warfare. So like if you can get to a place where even if you don't have all the perfect amenities, the best house or the best this, that, the other, you're gonna have to, there's gonna be some compromises to be able to turn off from, you know, even our show at times, or turn off from the news a little bit. I'm not saying turn us off, but spaced repetition, making sure you give yourself, you know, you're not in that anymore. You don't have to sort of embody or manifest the negative energy. That it's important to be aware of it, but maintain a distance to it. And how one of the best ways to maintain a distance to it is just not be around it in the first place. So there is like it's truly through, you know, a third medium like a computer screen or whatever that's away from the chaos going on. Doesn't mean you run from it. You should still be aware of it.
No, and we shouldn't run from it.
Yeah.
And that's not what I'm telling people. People sometimes think that I'm telling people that, you know, running to the hills is retreating from the front. No, it's like if I wanted to run to the hills, I'd move to another country. Yeah. You know, I'm still here in my country.
I just want to fortify your position.
That's it. I want to fortify in a place my position so that I can win in the long run. Right. Yeah. Because if you're in the liberal hellhole all the time, it's just wearing on you. And I think it's making it, I mean, obviously it's making people really on edge and angry. I mean, you go to a city like Vancouver, and it's been like this forever because the downtown east side is such a junky hellhole. It's a zombie apocalypse, and it's gotten 10 times bigger over the COVID lockdowns. But you go to a city like Vancouver, nobody makes eye contact. Nobody ever did. Even 20 years ago, they didn't, because it's always been like this. But with the masks, and now it's not only do people not look at you, people cower in fear. Like it's, I'm being a bit facetious, but it is just so ridiculous how, like, do you want to be in that? Especially if you have children. I mean, as a parent, I couldn't imagine taking my kids into the cities and explaining to them. I mean, and sometimes you have to. I mean, my kids, we go to Kelowna every now and then to get supplies, and my kids see the junkies. I mean, we go to parts that are uptown, not even in the shit of it all, and there's junkies boiling heroin on the spoon right in the doorway of the bank of the credit union. Right? I mean, and they just let it happen now. It's so crazy because it's literally the stuff that you guys talk about and show on your show. The police turning a blind eye, like Chicago, you know, with places like that. This is literally happening everywhere. I mean, all over Canada, in every city and town, it's the same thing. This is a global agenda policy. That's right. It is the global agenda to basically destroy Western civilization. I mean, it's so insane when you pull the lens back that it's like you go, how can this not be demonic? Like how could this not be a complete just barn burner? Like, how is this not just, scorched earth? Like you almost looking and thinking about what happened at Project Veritas. It's almost like what they did there. I mean, I called that a scorched earth tactic. They basically infiltrated them and then just didn't care that O'Keefe would go do his own. They just wanted to go and do collateral damage so that it just fucks shit up, basically. It just seems to me like that's the global policy, is scorched earth. When you look at the geoengineering, you look at the cultural depravity, the rise in crime, the governments just print money. They can throttle anything, but now they're just choosing to do it. And then now they want you to be distracted about this Trump thing, right? Because Trump never, the vaccine, I can't believe people are going back into this thing politically, but they are, and they want you so distracted because they're throttling every other metric around you. And it's nuts, man. Sometimes I'm speechless with it all.
So you got to go to, when you're speechless, you got to go to a line from like Gunnery Sergeant Highway, Clint Eastwood. Don't give the pricks the satisfaction. Heartbreak Ridge, right? These people want you scared. They want you helpless. Like every day I'd make it a goal to be like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to build this way. You want me to go that way? I'm going to go this way with it. Yeah, be contrarian to the globalist agenda, maybe.
Absolutely.
Yeah, what would be sort of like one of the key things for people to consider when they sort of reprioritize some of the values or change their thinking about how they can go about gaining some independence and maybe getting away from the bigger cities? I know a lot of people I can just hear it sort of in the chat that some people are dependent on certain jobs or certain skill sets that are located there or require location in
Shorter answer is I'll let Curtis
gain more
answer long
skills,
form, but for the short answer, you have to decide to do it and then you figure it out. If you decide that
that's a good point.
You make a decision, because I've interviewed people who have done it during the pandemic, and Radowski's like, oh, I made a decision, then I figured out how to back up a trailer and drive a trailer after I decided I already needed the trailer to move out of here. So make the decision, then you figure it out. Curtis, go to you.
Well, yeah, and that's ultimately it's a mindset thing. But at the same time, I think Radowski's single with no kids, and so it's an easier.
That's what I'm doing.
Like, right, exactly. Tony, and so I think the reality of it is, I try to look at it super practically, and I tell people this all the time. There's no question that when you leave the city, you're going to have to accept that you're going to change your quality of life fairly significantly. I mean, it's up to you on which city or which place you're going to go, and all the devils in the details of that. But one thing I've seen a lot of people do is they accept that, okay, I had this career and this job, and a lot of people lost those careers with the COVID lockdowns anyways, if they didn't want to take the shot. I've got a handful of professionals here that are now working in trades because they didn't take the shot. And so they went from some of these guys were technicians in hospitals that fixed radiology machines or things that do scans and things like that, really specialized work. They didn't take the shot. So now they were making $150,000 a year, and now they're making $50,000 a year. So I'm not saying that that's what everybody's going to have to do, but you're going to have to accept the fact that you might have to take a step down the rung in order to secure yourself in some ways. And so I would look at it this way: instead of getting fixated on the money, because that's one thing that the Rockefellers and the banking cartels want you to be fixated on, because then they can leverage you in any way. Broaden your perspective. Start thinking about the 8 forms of capital. Start thinking about, there's financial capital, there's family capital, there's social capital, there's experiential capital, there's resource capital, there's biological capital, there's cultural capital, there's 8 forms of capital. And you might just have to shift those capital allocations around in different ways temporarily. So maybe a little hit in financial capital, but now you've got quality of life, and now that can go into family capital. Right? The growth of your family is probably the most important thing in your life, and that also lends itself to spiritual capital, in which one thing, spiritual fortitude is something that people are going to need a lot of. And so I think it just comes down to accepting that there's going to be a certain amount of change, but would you rather do it now ahead of the time, or would you rather try to do it when everybody else is? And I would urge people to not be in that situation and accept that there's going to be changes now. I mean, I've told people, I had a number of guys that I've helped over the years. One guy was coming out of Chicago, and he completely reskilled himself. He was a nurse, and I told him, if you want to learn how to be a farmer the fastest, just go work for some really good farms and offer to work for very little. And work hard and learn, and they'll pay you more. Good farmers respect hard work, and they appreciate somebody who can just show up and create value. So many people just don't know how to create value. They just think that you should just get paid for showing up. You know what I mean? But there's good people out there, and that American spirit is still alive and well, especially in the countryside. And I think it's the same in Canada here too. And I think you just have to get out there, like you said, Richard, and just do it, and you will figure it out. But and it's not going to be easy. There's no way about it. But if you're honest with yourself, I think you'll notice that it's not going to get any easier. It's only going to get harder as time goes on. And so the quicker you can adapt now and be ahead of the curve, because there is a little bit of, I wouldn't say there's a lull in the rollout of the New World Order, but at least it's not as visceral with lockdowns. The COVID lockdowns were so visceral. And all of us, most of us, a lot of us experienced, in some states didn't have any of this. But you probably saw people wearing masks and freaking out, even if you were in a state that was relatively free. But we experienced that, and that has subsided a little bit. It's gone back to the psychological and information and the 5th generation warfare at the moment. They had to throttle back the visceral tyranny. And so right now there's kind of a good opportunity because a lot of other people aren't panicking to get out. And that's the best time to get out, is when there's no panic.
It's also the best time, if it's your first time doing something like this, you don't want to do it when everyone else is trying to do it. So
Hell no.
before a panic and before the interest and takes up all the resources in the area too.
Yep, absolutely.
I mean, it's a very erudite and wise course you've created and decision that you've made for yourself. It's something that my girlfriend and I, and with my family actually helping out, we sort of purchased a small homestead together and are investing on the property, setting up a greenhouse and getting chickens and doing that stuff. And just little steps, we'll build up each year and just pray that civilization doesn't crash in that standpoint. I know not everyone can do that. So in that capacity, what would you tell people that are kind of stuck, at least right now, in a city or around sort of a city area, sort of a megalopolis, like on the eastern seaboard or something? Just try to get out as much as you can, or try to find property that's more amenable to you, that maybe it's the price points for homesteads are a little out there, but maybe they can still get away from like the chaos of like inner city or even suburban life around the inner cities.
I would say even just moving out of the major metropolitan areas and going renting in a smaller town, towns that are between 2,000 to 15,000, maybe 20,000. If you go towns that are smaller than 2,000, then it's hard to get resources, because you're going to need resources to start, But then towns that are over 20,000, you just see the woke, you see the 15-minute city stuff all over. You see that type of urban development and implementation of the New World Order on the local level that you guys have been talking about forever. You see that in those towns that are larger than that. So even just getting out into areas of that's like that is a major step, because then you might say, hey, well, I kind of like this area. Let's look for something in this area, and then being closer to that is another step there. And maybe it doesn't happen right away. Maybe you got to wait for that moment. But as you were saying, Tony, I mean, what you talked about there is a thing that I would really encourage a lot more people to do. Families need to come together. And if you have a mother or father, and I might be in a situation where I have to do this with my mom. My dad died a couple of years ago, and it was during the COVID lockdowns, and it was insane going into the hospital and dealing with all that shit.
I'm sorry. That's terrible.
It's okay.
The protocol was insane.
It was just nuts. But we might have to take our parents in, because do you want your mom or dad going into these hospitals now with the stuff? Like they're just out in the open killing people. I mean, it's absolutely insane. And I saw them do it to my dad. They totally dosed my dad with an unnecessary amount of drugs. And it was too late. And I asked why are you guys doing this? I got him off the drugs. I did the best I could, but it was too little, too late. But families are going to have to come back together, and that's probably a blessing. Yeah, your relationship with your mom and your dad probably isn't the best thing, but you probably do love them. And, can you imagine sending them to a retirement home now with all this? Do you want them to get the shot? Because they're most likely going to have to get the shot if they're going into those places. And so you might say, hey, Dad, why don't you put up some cash? Let's get this place. We'll get you sorted, a place for you to live, and let's do it. People are going to have to come together, and it might be the best thing that could happen to us culturally.
I was looking to see if the glitch was in my Zoom or his Zoom.
He has a timer on his Wi-Fi.
That's
right.
The
timer and the Wi-Fi.
The old 11:30 trick. So yeah, he did. I bet he did. He'll come back. And be like,
there we go. I don't know
Did
where
you have
I
a timer on the Wi-Fi?
Dude, you know what? Richard, give me 2 seconds. I'm just going to, just so that doesn't happen.
Thank you, Joshua. Yeah, see.
I do remember that from the last interview. Yeah.
That's another good technique. Have a end to your Wi-Fi at home and have it.
And I was actually looking for an opportunity, because I was thinking that because it's set for 9 o'clock to save power. I don't need to save the power anymore because we get so much solar now, but in the winter it's pretty precious. So I don't know where I was cut out there. I was talking about families and stuff, but
no, I think you were making a good point about families going back to a more traditional method. Like back in the olden days, in many cultures, they would just have 2 houses. And
Yeah.
the parents live on with the children, and the grandparents lived over here, and then they'd pass away, and then these people move over here, and now the kids that just got married, they got the other house, and they just moved between these two houses for hundreds of years.
Yep.
Some of these places.
Yep.
In
I know.
Americas and in Europe. So it's like,
Yep. And we might have to come back to that. I mean, realistically too, when the economy starts the wheels come off, I mean, you might not be able to afford to send your mom and dad to a home anyways. Like things could get, I mean, who knows? I mean, it's so easy to speculate on it all and guess Mad Max this or that, but who knows? But what I do know is that, in Western culture, we're starved for connection again. We're starved. We're over sensationalized. We're commodified, commercialized. We need to get back to God. I mean, I'm not a Christian really, but I do find the deeper purpose and meaning when you get with your family and you do the wholesome things that we all used to do, and everybody's on their phone and on their computers all the time, and you get on the land, it just changes your life so much. And when I see my kids in the garden and just their response and how their well-being and just their sort of overall attitude when they spend hours in the garden or hours in nature, they're 100 times better than when they watch a show on the iPad. We let our kids watch a show every now and then. We curate it to an extremely strict level, and we only download stuff and let them watch that. We don't let them surf around. But my kids are 100 times more likable and better when they're spending time outside in nature than when they watch a damn show. And a little bit of tough times might help people in the long run. And maybe the silver lining with all this is that if people have to have simpler lives and we go back to some agrarian means in a way, I mean, it might not be the worst thing.
Yeah, it's a dopamine reassignment type activity.
Exactly. And I mean, here's the thing though, do you want to choose to make that? Do you want to have that choice to do that, or do you want to have that forced on you? I would way rather choose, like I've done and Tony's done and you've done, Richard, where we can use, let's use civilization now because it's still here. Let's get ourselves set up. Let's get our ducks in a row so that when the lights go out, you're not scrambling.
Yeah, and I think that more people are interested in finding a property and then finding how to bring the accoutrements of that property, how to get food growing on it, how to have livestock, how to have greenhouses, how to have fresh water, how to build shelter, collect rainwater, all these sort of things. And the part that I don't know about personally is how to scout the terrain and read the land.
Yeah, right.
And I was all set to go pay you for a couple hours at your consulting rate, but you made this nice course, so I'm going to check that out first.
Yeah.
And then come to you for the really necessary stuff.
Yeah,
I mean, that saves you time. That's good. That's less internet time for you too.
Well, yeah, and I can't even possibly disseminate the information quick enough for people. But I mean, do you want me to show you? Like, what do you guys want to do right now, or how long did you plan to have me on? Or
do you want to do like 10 minutes? Show us behind the scenes. Lift up the hood.
I kind of want to show you some. I want to show you some stuff on Google Earth.
Yeah, show me. Let's get educated. Let's get a taste for it.
I think it would be beneficial to your audience. And I think maybe what I can do is, can I share my screen here? Yes, I can.
Yeah, you should be able to. The only people who aren't interested in this are the people who already have it set up. So they're fine. But everyone else, this is pretty interesting because if you're not trying to do this for yourself, people that are trying to do this for themselves, and you probably want to hang out with them on their cool property. So let's check this out. Exactly.
So you can see, so here's Google Earth Pro. This is a free tool and it's incredible. And it can tell you so much information about a place. So, here's the US, and I look at a number of filters when I'm looking at properties. I mean, one thing I use, and this is what we show people in the course how to use, is this layer called it's the Copen-Geiger climate classification system. And it's a super handy tool that tells you a lot about the climate in a particular area. Can you guys see that?
Yeah. What's the difference between purple and green? I live on the border of that.
Oh, so you're down from the green. Yeah. So the green here, this is called a CFC or a CFA climate. And this is temperate. So this is where you would have, winters, but usually wet instead of snowy. Lots of precipitation. I mean, think about North Carolina, very, very wet. Think about Tennessee. All these states are similar. All these parts are similar in that they're temperate. And you have different variations of that, whether you're in a USDA zone, 7 or 9, that's what you would have the difference in this area. But this tells you that this area gets a lot of rainfall, has mild winters, and has humid summers. This dark purple area here, this is a DFA climate. So you think about, you've been to Illinois and Indiana, southern parts of Michigan. You get a winter, you get a decent amount of snow. It can be really hot and humid in the summer. And then you get up into this lighter purple area. This is a DFB. This is the climate that I live in. This is a lot of people in the US and a lot of people in Canada live in this climate. This is the boreal climate. And actually all the purples are boreal. And then you look at the and it's neat too, because if you toggle back between the geography, you can see this yellow. This is called the BSK. This is your sort of high and dry desert. And if you've been to these areas, you know what that's like. You go through Montana, drive straight through Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, all very similar climates, certainly getting hotter as you get down here and parts of it into Texas. But this tool just shows you a lot and tells you a lot about what a place is. And in our course, I spend a lot more time on explaining this, but in a nutshell, this is a layer that I use when I'm looking for properties, because you can just tell, like, if you've been to any of these states in the Southeast, their climate is very similar, very similar. You go to any of these states here in, South Dakota, Illinois, Iowa, very similar, and so on and so forth. All these places have a similarity in their climate. Or even you look at these CSB and CSA climates in California, you think about the precipitation and the humidity that comes off the ocean, the mist that comes off the ocean. That's all experienced in the whole coastline of the US. But anyways, it's a really neat filter. Another thing I do too is I look at, okay, so if I'm an American and I'm living in DC, okay, I want to get the hell out of DC. Where do I want to go? I have a number of filters that I use that just kind of help me look at what to eliminate. So one thing I'm not interested in the US is Tornado Alley. I don't want to live in Tornado Alley. So I just Googled Tornado Alley and I drew on Google Earth this. I mean, there's more details to this. There's areas that are worse than others and areas that are better than others. But overall, I wouldn't want to live. If I'm looking for property now, I'll just avoid that area. Though again, I'm not, anybody who's living here in this part of Kansas might say, hey, I haven't seen a tornado in 100 years. Fair enough. I drew this really broadly. But another filter I put on is I don't want to be in hurricane zones. I don't want to live anywhere near that. And again, same thing here, really broad strokes. There's way more details. If you really want to know the high risk areas, you can zoom in and find them. But again, I just drew it on this map really broadly. And so I'd say that. I'd also say I don't want to live anywhere near the southern border of Mexico. Just the crime, the trafficking. Don't want to go near there. And I just kind of included LA in there too, because I think, if you're moving to LA at this point, you're crazy. If you're stuck in the area, I get it. I sympathize. But so this is my filter, and then I add another filter. I go, well, political preference. Right. So where are we left with here? So we eliminate, I could have included Arizona, but these are all the red states basically. And so I would probably start there. But again, there's exceptions. Like I said, rural places aren't so bad, especially low. I wouldn't consider California at this point to move to California or New York. I wouldn't even consider it. Even if you're rural, still, it's so heavy-handed to state I'd avoid it. But these are the kind of filters that I'd go through, and I just say, hey, okay, let's look at Arkansas. Okay, what about some places in Arkansas? What I can actually do here is kind of to show you some of the places that we looked at, and these are actually all the properties that we profiled in the course. This is all of them there. So we went as broad as we could. Some states we just couldn't find properties in. Like it's actually very difficult to find property in Idaho right now. Very difficult because everybody wanted to move to Idaho in the COVID lockdowns, right? But this is what we profiled. And so I could just kind of zoom in on anything in here and just kind of show you, like we looked at this one place, what's this one here in Alabama, or let's just pick something else. Let's pick something in Texas, this place in Texas. And I could just kind of show you how I do some basic analytics of a property when I'm looking at something. So, you know, of course, I don't have in the course, we look at the real estate listing and all that. I don't have that on draw right now. I could get it, but we don't necessarily need it. This is just basically a raw piece of land in Texas. And this is one of our A properties. It was rated really well for a variety of reasons. One is when you zoom out on this property, if I click on my roads here, I can see I'm not on any major road. So that's good, because then when people are exiting major metropolitan areas, they're most likely not going to just drive by. You know, most crimes are crimes of opportunity, right? And so not being on a major road is really good. This property has a ton of natural vegetation. I always tell people, and I've said this for years, it's better to start with trees than to not. So if you can have trees on a property, it's better because they take a lifetime to grow and they take an afternoon to take down. So, you know, to clear out a couple acres of trees, if you wanted to make an area to farm, maybe you'd say in this area, you want to cut out a little pasture, you know, you could log that in a couple days work with a buddy, but then you got a resource out of it at the same time. You got some trees. But this property had some pond areas in here. And you can tell more too when you look at, you use the timeline feature in Google Earth. It's really neat because then you can kind of go back in time and see what happened on that property. And so we can see that they actually logged this area right down here. And so this is a more recent photo. And so if you were going to move in here, you'd probably start here. You'd probably use this area because it's already cleared for you. Your neighbor has a pond, but you could probably build a pond in here. With Google Earth, it's great because you can move around with the 3D and you can see the topography a lot better. And so I can actually see that this could be a pond because you can kind of see that as a depression, right? So there we go. We have a potential pond on our property. They get a lot of rain in this climate, so it wouldn't take much to put in some diversions in here that would collect rain wherever it was shedding to. You can see that there's some valleys here, things shed in this way. So you could put in some basic features, ditches essentially, that could just divert more water into that area of a pond. Because unfortunately, this is what thing that drives me crazy about property development is how they subdivide things. And, you know, this was all one property at one point that they subdivided it. And it's kind of sad that there's this wicked pond here that you don't have on this property, but you could build it. But this property just has a lot going for it because it's not on any major roads. It's got a lot of trees that if you wanted to develop in here and be kind of hidden, you could. You know, when I'm looking at things too, I look at the neighbors. I go, okay, what are the neighbors doing? Okay, let's take a look at this guy's place. What's going on here? It's kind of a okay homestead. Nothing too much. He's got some bees here. Kind of sketchy neighbor here with some shipping containers and stuff going on there. Who knows what that's all about? Generally speaking, though, you look around, you go, okay, there's no major threats here. You know, there's no there's a little bit of oil and gas development here. This is some gas drilling. So
yeah, do you have a fracking map or something to overlay on that?
Which one?
A fracking map?
No, but I bet you could find one.
Yeah, overlay of all the places.
It's easy to identify fracking, though. Fracking is just this stuff. You see this all over. You see these well pads that they put. It's the same. It's the exact same thing in Canada. Anytime I'm looking at properties in Alberta, that's the main thing I'm looking for. But so you got a little bit of that around, not a ton.
Yeah.
And you certainly, you know, if you were going to look at this property, you would get a well report. If right. There is a well here, you'd get a well report, and that's not expensive to do. And so you check that out. But I always like I always go further out. I look at what we do in the course is we do an analysis of the 100 or we call it's the 60-mile or 100-kilometer area around the property. So this area here, we basically go, okay, let's do a socioeconomic breakdown of everything here. So we total up all the towns, and we get median age, median income, stuff like that, to get a sense of, what's going on here. Because if you have like some places in, say, Arkansas or Oklahoma, you'll see really low median income, like $20,000 a year household income. And then you'll see a median age of 59, right? Generally not good demographics to get into when you're looking and you're thinking about the future. You're thinking, I got a family, we want to build a homestead, we need resources, we want to have friends around, we want to have allies. Probably not the best place to jump into. But a place like this, it's all right. I mean, we're not in the blast radius of Austin, of the insanity going on in Austin. We're far away enough from that you're not really going to feel much of it out here. It's going to be fairly rural communities, people on homesteads, and just by looking at the property itself, and then just looking what's around there, you can kind of get a sense like these, what's going on with these people. They're on their property, there's hay cropping. There's not a lot of serious agriculture. Like that's one of my biggest red flags is farming. And, some of these other properties we looked at are just, you look at some stuff in Missouri. Let me see if we can look at some of these.
And it's all corporate farming?
Yeah, you'll see. I mean, this property actually rated out okay, but let me just see here. You'll see just big ag, and you're just like, I don't really want to be too close to that stuff.
Yeah, it's good to be next to hayfield because they know
hayfields
people who
exactly.
have
So like
animals that eat hay. That's how you get
hayfields is a benign type of agriculture. It's when and this is actually all right. This isn't what you want to look for when you want to look for dangerous agriculture. And I could probably just scan. Actually, let's go to Nebraska and I'll show you some dangerous agriculture. But when you see really expensive irrigation, here, I'll take this filter off, like center pivots and long wheel lines. Yeah. That's the kind of stuff you don't want to be. So you come into parts of Nebraska here. Yeah, here you go. This kind of stuff. You come in and you see this. This is all conventional big ag. This is all corn, soy, poison, basically.
Yeah,
that's
circles.
Yeah.
I remember seeing those circles when I first saw Google Earth like 20 years ago. And I'm like, why are all these circles in the middle of the desert out there? And it's like,
exactly.
That's irrigation patterns.
It's center pivot irrigation. It's the most sort of efficient form of irrigation for large scale conventional farms. It's not efficient, but as far as irrigation is concerned, but as far as corporate farming, that's the thing. And so as soon as you see center pivots, that's all GMO conventional ag. I wouldn't want to live anywhere near that. I encourage people to live in areas that are like, even if you want to farm, it's better to start with, depends what you want to do. Guys like Joel Salatin he'd debate me on this a bit because he's less of a prepper than I am, but I wouldn't want to be anywhere near conventional agriculture at all. I'd want to live, I like mountains, I like forests, I like areas that are away from major cities. I don't want to be anywhere near major highways. You don't want to be on, so even in a highway, so for example here, you don't want to be in a situation like this where, say, you got Interstate 80 here, and then you got Highway 34 here. You don't want to be on, say, a road like this because people will beeline. They'll go from here to get to Highway 80. And so you'll always have thoroughfare traffic. You want to be on roads that are more local. Ideally, if you're looking for a perfect case scenario, that's what you want to be in. You want to be in places that aren't, you're just going to have like commuter traffic. You don't want to be on commuter traffic roads. Again, you can be, and it's not the end of the world. I don't want to freak people out here. I'm just saying, if you're looking and you want to go and find something optimal, you're better off just being away from that, the insanity. Get out into Areas like this, what's going on here? I don't even know where we are. I'm just kind of looking at geography, but look at this, what's our elevation here? 294 meters. That's about 900 feet above sea level. Hey, that's an all right elevation. Look at this, way more nature. And then we got agriculture in there, which isn't a bad thing, because it means that you have soil. If there's agriculture there and there's people farming there, there's soil there. But we see, this is interesting.
Oh, camouflage.
Yeah, what's going on there? There's some interesting patterns. I love Google Earth is just fascinating to just play around with. But it's more benign agriculture. It's not huge corn, soy fields that they're spraying Roundup and just a total disaster. Get in nature. Think about where the water is. When you look at a property here, let's just zoom in here for a second. You can look at the topography and you can see water always goes in valleys. So when rain and snow comes down, as it sheds or melts, it goes into valleys. And so this is why valleys are always greener, is because that's where they collect more water. But you always want to be aware of your geography and where your water is. And when I found my property, I had these sort of draws on my property, because I live on a mountainous property like this. And I had this feature just like this. And there was a well here, but it didn't work. And so a lot of the people that were looking at this place, they flaked out on the deal because, the well doesn't work. I don't want to drill into the well. And the guy only was going to take cash on the deal, because he'd been burned by so many COVID buyers that just weren't ready and didn't really know how good this place was. And I could read the landscape, and I was like, yeah, man, look at that. With the amount of snow we get in here, I could capture so much water off that. And I took a gamble, because I was like, well, I'm going to drill a well and hopefully I hit water. But if I don't, I'm confident that I could get water from the snowmelt and the shedding of something like a valley like that. And that's where, when you start to be able to read geography and look at the patterns and just see things, you'll pick out opportunities that most people won't see. And, an interesting thing too, is like when you're looking at maps, say when you're using Zillow or Realtor.com, we mostly use Realtor.com, and you get in the map view of it, just by looking at the roads, you can tell things. So one of my non-negotiables was I didn't want to live on a north-facing slope. So that means that if I was in a valley, say, and highways often follow water, that's kind of neat. They go the path of least resistance. It's easier to make a highway through a valley than it is across a mountain, right? So highways, generally speaking, follow valleys. And so I could look at a map and I could tell you that if I don't want a north facing, I'm not going to look at any properties along the south side of this highway. I won't even look at them on the map. I could just tell that on the map. So that's all right off. Don't even bother looking at it. Whereas stuff on the north side of that road, I'd consider, because it's going to have a south aspect. And this photo must have taken in winter. That's why it's like that. But south aspect is great, especially in cold climates, because when you face the south, you actually gain and can gain more than a zone in climate difference because of the amount of sunlight, more sunlight you'll get on that slope. And it's just like the same here. We're on a south slope, and we get this crazy microclimate effect where we have really early sun in the morning, which is so helpful for crops, and it warms everything up, and it actually creates that heat island effect on this kind of rocky knob that we live on. And our property is often 3 or 4 degrees warmer at our house than it is at the bottom of our driveway, which is in shade at the bottom. But so you can identify things like microclimates just by looking at broad geography. You can see where there's opportunity zones. And often just noticing where water goes is a huge one. And, I've saved, even in my consulting, I saved probably a half dozen people from buying properties in flood zones because they were close to a river. And I zoomed in and I'd come down to the property and I'd say, well, how what's the elevation off the river? So I'll come down, and I don't know this is a flood zone, but just to illustrate a point, I can look at my map, and in the bottom right of the corner, I can see that elevation above sea level. I have mine in meters, but I can see, okay, at the river, right at the base of the river, we're at 214. Here we're 221. So we're pretty high off the river. So that's a good sign. That means that, the house here, he's at 220. So it's most likely that that place will never flood. But if you pull the lens back, you can actually see that in a 200-year event, this area would flood, but it's most likely not going to happen. And because of a lot of infrastructure that's put in to drain things, it's most likely not going to happen. People have obviously been farming in this area for a long time, but that's something that you look for. When you look at a property, you want to look at what are the geographical risks, you know? The first thing, so like when I'm looking at something, the first thing I do is I look at the climate. And I pull up the Köppen Geiger. And you can do a real easy, like you can just go into Google, pick a town, could be here, Green Bay, Wisconsin. I just go into Google, Green Bay, Wisconsin, climate data. Boom. Google will give you the charts right there. You can find annual rainfall, annual snowfall, wind speed, annual wind. Like all this stuff is incredibly useful because you guys in the US have the privilege of being able to just move wherever. And so you might be from upstate New York where you're in a DFA climate or a DFB, and you want to move into something that's more like a CFA. You want to maybe come down to Louisiana, Arkansas, something like that. Totally different climate. And what and your expectations will just be blown away because it's completely different. And so you want to know these metrics. And so the first thing I do is I analyze, well, the first thing I do is look for threats right away. If I'm going to zoom in on a property, I look, what's any immediate threats? Big ag, power lines running through the properties, any imminent domain, stuff like that. Look at the neighbors, you know, just take a look at the broad area outside of the property. Then once I've done that, then I look at the climate. Okay, we're in a CFA climate. That's the temperate. We can get tons of rain. You know, sometimes I looked at some properties in Arkansas that get 120 inches of rain a year. Like that's a lot of rain. Like that means that there's a lot of days of the year that you can't even work. And so these are super important considerations. Or you might look at a property up in some of the mountains here, in New Mexico even, that get a huge amount of snow, and you're kind of rural and you got a long driveway like I do. And so if you got a lot of snow, you got to deal with that. And so how are you going to deal with that? And so it all comes down to, what are you going to have to put into this property? And so all of these metrics, climate, geography, water, socioeconomics, all these things, they can cost you. And so if you live in a really inhospitable climate, like most of New Mexico, much of Arizona, you have to put a lot into being comfortable in that climate, especially if you're going to grow crops. It's not easy to grow here because there's no soil. Like, just turn off the climate classification system, I can just see that there's no soil in this area. Whereas you come down to here, this is why, I mean, the main reason Americans settled in this area, well, I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but a big reason is it's completely fertile. This is undoubtedly one of the most fertile places to live in the world is this area. Whereas California, Central Valley, also incredibly fertile, but only fertile because of massive, large-scale industrial irrigation systems. The whole Central Valley, without massive infrastructure, this whole place would just be desert very quickly. But this is terraforming. You know, we have terraformed the places we live in, and California is a prime example of it. But in this place in the U.S., it just kind of happens a little bit more naturally, and that's kind of a good thing. Like, if you can live in a climate where you don't have to go to extraordinary lengths to get water, or extraordinary lengths to get soil, or extraordinary lengths to protect yourselves from the climate, all the better. That means less money and resources up front when you want to get set up and building a homestead. Like, what I'm showing people in this course is I'm just showing you how to get there. The whole thing on how to do it is a whole other, that's a whole other ball game. But the reason I focus so much on showing people this stuff and going through all these scales of permanence is that the better property you can pick from the beginning, the less money you're going to have to spend. And I'll show you an incredible property here. This is actually my personal favorite property that we looked at in this entire course. It's an absolute gem. I think it's sold actually recently. but this is in Kettle Falls, Washington. So this is northeastern Washington. And you talk about a property that has almost everything except the socioeconomics. So the socioeconomics are challenging here a little bit when we pull the lens back. So we're really close to Canada. If you've ever been up here, it's funny. It feels like you're in the end of the world. Like it feels like you're on the edge of the world. But then you cross the border and it's like all Canadians live by the US border. And so all of a sudden in civilization again. But up here, it's like, it's really remote. So besides from this place being somewhat limited in what you can get, because you zoom out, you know, besides from going into Canada, what have you got? I mean, Tonasco's a small town. These are small towns. You have to commute quite a ways to say get down to Spokane, which would be your closest place to get, you know, all your main resources. There's a Home Depot and stuff like that, say. But this place, as far as land, is just phenomenal. So this property, this place was selling for $500,000. Now, that seems like a lot, but for what's here, it's insane. I won't pull up the listing right now, but if people take the course, they'll see it. This had a passive solar home, 2 of them. And so this was a COVID buyer that went out here and basically pioneered this place. This is a half acre. I think this was a half acre garden that was all prepped. It's all ready to go. Yeah, a little over half acre. This is a passive solar home orientated to the south, windows on the south, super efficient, unbelievable, beautiful home. He built another one and he didn't finish it, but he got it to lock up. So it's all like ready just to basically renovate, finish the roof and do, he had the windows on it and everything. But this property is so amazing because number one, it is in a really nice climate. This is, if you like cold climates, this is a DSB climate. It's a really nice, it's like a little bit more milder. So I live in a DFB, which is boreal, you know, cold winters, but hot, dry summers, tons of snow, lovely summers, hot and dry, which the dryness can be challenging. But in a DSB, you actually get precipitation. This place gets about 40 to 50 inches of rain a year, which is really nice, but it still gets about 60 inches of snow. So it's kind of nice. It's a little bit more mild, gets a good amount of snow, gets a good amount of rain in the growing season. But this property is so perfect for a number of reasons. So the climate's good. We're only 700 meters, which is times 3, so 2,100 feet above sea level. We're tucked away. Look at this. We're at the end of a road. And then our access in, boom, real simple. Into the property, all the main infrastructure of the property is right there, accessible. Neighbors, they're all kind of homestead farming. This is all hay cropping, all benign infrastructure. Private lakes up here. Property's already somewhat developed, has a good amount of wildlife. So just like, you know, lots of trees. You got your own mountaintop, surrounded by state land here. So you can come out here, you can hunt and trap out here till you're blue in the face. This is essentially your property, though it's not, but you can kind of just explore it and enjoy it, you know? But in the property itself here, you've got a good, so you look at, you know, this is 40 acres. And with a homestead, all you really need is 5 acres to do all your stuff. So if you got 5 acres where you can have some crops, have the main infrastructure of your homestead and all of that, this place has it. In fact, it's got a good 7 acres there that's really nice, easy in. You could develop. The way they bent this driveway is perfect because then you can add infrastructure along here as you needed it. Maybe you want to do a barn, you want to do some animal sheds, things like that. You've got a half acre for a garden already there. It's already there. And then you've got the rest of this field for crops. So you want to do some crops for your animals over winter. Maybe you want to do some hay and straw, stuff like that. You can do that. This property was really neat. When we did a full analysis of this one, we showed how you could actually turn this into a pond down here. And so it's easy to observe that actually just by looking at the map, because you can see how it's really green here. There's a reason it's green is because the topography of this property all sheds down this way, even here. So there's a bit of a ridge here. There's like a secondary ridge that comes down. So you could very easily do a couple ditches in here and move a massive amount of snow melt into this pond. You could just dig it, keep it down there, keep it in and amongst the trees. And the also serendipitous thing about this as well is that the trees are on the south side. So that pond is going to get lots of shade. meaning that it'll evaporate less. And so this property was, one of my favorites. I couldn't believe it. And it was on the market for a long time too. Like somebody probably got in, probably offered 350 and got it for 2 passive solar homes and an insane property with insane privacy, but also good access in. This road is well maintained. And this road this isn't a driveway. So this is actually going to be maintained by whatever the regional area is that maintains roads. So you don't have to do it. So in the wintertime, the only thing you have to plow is this. So that's convenient. I mean, in a shit hits fan scenario, yeah, you might be managing that road, but you'd be looking at collaborating with maybe one other neighbor here or something. But that's a property that is just like has all the bells and whistles. This you talked about a scenario where you could just go in, turnkey, grow food, capture water, have a nice climate, very set up for off-grid. This property is actually grid tied, but this property can be off-grid so easily, especially because of the way the houses are set up. You could put panels on there. It's got just tons of light. When you look at it this way, one thing you can do in Google Earth is if you want to see what it looks like in the winter, you can just take the guy here and then drag him down by the house. And the people who built this house were really smart and they would have done this, but you can go into this feature here and I can tell it, I'll go 1221, which is the winter solstice. And I can go and let's look at what our sun is like in the winter. So our sunset in the winter time is, 425. That's not bad. I mean, this is an open sky, there's nothing really, this little mountain here, a little bit, but not much. The sun's still up at 9. So for a winter sun, for a northern climate in the US, it's really good. And that's if you're living in the mountains, that's what I'm always considering is where are the mountains? And that's where with Google Earth Pro, you can just zoom in and look around and look at those angles and see, how things are. And these guys built this place really smart. He put the house up on this high secondary ridge here to get it out of the shade of this mountaintop in the morning. So he had the least amount. So you got a little bit of shade there, but not a ton. But yeah, I mean, that's essentially what I do in this course is we just go through 52 properties and they're all about 20 minutes to a half an hour. And I do a full analysis. And I even talk about design stuff too, where I'll show certain properties and say, hey, I would do this, I would do that. I'd put this here. I'd put my gardens here and so on and so forth. And just basically my hope is that by me just doing this repetitively and you watching me do it 52 times, you're going to just get a sense of, what it's like and just watch it happen in real time and just kind of learn. But, these tools are free. Like you can do this for free. And so you can essentially, when you're looking for properties, you can essentially do 99% of the work from your desk at home and then just do a handful of viewings. And if you can use these tools and go through this evaluation system that I show people, then you've done most of the work already. And then you're not spending a lifetime driving around, because if you want to get out of state, well, then looking at properties out of state takes time. And so you want to make sure that if you're going to go visit, if you're in upstate New York and you want to go visit places in Washington or, Western Texas or Eastern Texas, you want to make sure that you're going to a place that's most likely going to be a win. Otherwise, you just wasted a ton of time and money to get there.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And that's definitely a comprehensive look because I hadn't seen Google Earth Pro and I hadn't tried to apply it to looking for these things. And yes, people could do these on their own, but it would take a long time for them to figure it out. So it seems like you're doing them a service by saying, I'm going to save you time. You want to get the thing you want the first time and not the 5th time, then invest a little bit of time, energy, attention into that process and get a better result to choose from. And
I mean, and I'll tell you what, Richard, if I wanted to be just a straight up capitalist, I'd continue what I'm doing. And I've had millionaires reach out to me. And so Joel Salatin is a personal friend of mine. He's had billionaires reach out to him and they do this. I mean, I could keep doing this. I could keep charging people exorbitant amounts of money because it's a valuable service. I mean, if you pay me, say, a few $1,000s to just spend a good amount of time looking at properties, and I pick the best one, say you send me 10 and you want like a full analysis, and I've done this for people for years, and I pick you that one, and you go there and you're like, this is a win, and it's a $300,000-$400,000 investment, and you win on that investment, I could easily make the case that that service is worth at least $4,000. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 1% at least.
At least,
right?
It's valuable, and you can find premium realtors who will do that for you, but they're going to charge you on the back end, right? They're going to charge you on the sale of the property. Whereas if you could just learn this stuff yourself and
be a smarter shopper.
Yeah, you'll be a smarter shopper. And my experience of showing this isn't just coming from me using Google Earth Pro. I have visited farms and homesteads around the world, and I've been on the land, and I see these patterns, and I've applied it to this. And Google Earth is a great way to view it, but what I teach people is my eye on when I'm on a property and what I look for and the questions that I ask, and then we can use these tools as well to assist in that. And the tools are great and they're there, but yeah, I'm not just teaching people how to use Google Earth Pro. I'm showing people my 15 years of looking at land and working on land and using this as a lens.
Yeah, you're actually able to use those tools knowledgeably and with wisdom, whereas we would just be looking for, hey, look, there's shapes in the roads.
Exactly.
There's two triangles right there.
Yeah,
you know how to qualify
people
land.
Just go through the listings. Go ahead, Tony.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. No, I was just going to follow up with what you were just saying.
I was just going to say, most people just look at listings and then they look at the photos, and then I'm actually surprised when I ask people, how have you used this tool? Like, people don't. Like, most people just look at the listing and that's it. Yeah. And then they go there, and like, what a waste of time. Because when I was looking for my property, I literally looked at hundreds of properties. I pretty much looked at everything that was for sale in the category I was looking for across British Columbia, at least in the prime area, the southern central interior. And I looked at hundreds of properties, and I only had to view, I probably viewed, I don't know, close to 20. But I was looking for a long time, and that was over a long period of time. But people can look at, view very little properties. What you want to do is if you want to spot the opportunities, it's just a numbers game. It's just like, talent is great, but hard work usually rules, right? And so it's the same thing with this. It's just time. And so if you want to pick a winner, you want to look at the most amount of properties, disqualify 90% of them as early as you can, then take that last 10%, put them through this evaluation process, then just have a handful that you're actually going to look at, and guaranteed, if you do this the way I've shown you, the whole process, you're only going to look at places that are winners. And your biggest challenge then is going to be like, is it this place or this place? Because they're both really good. And if you've done your homework before you showed up, you probably also found some things on site, because there are some things that you just can't see. The realtors either hide them in the photos, or you just can't see it in the geography.
Yeah.
And usually those are just red flags that you can only find on the property. It's not something that's external. Like, we can see all the socioeconomic threats, we can see the climate threats, we can see the geography threats and all that. But
you can't smell the mothballs from the video.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah.
What's a major value? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this hits on a lot of different parts of the spectrum, because there's people looking to do this, there's people looking to do this later, there's people who've already done this and now they're thinking about these other parts. We all need to protect ourselves from the elements, and we all need resources in order to live. And it is becoming more and more challenging to figure these things out in the usual way of just going to the grocery store, because now there might be lines, or there might be shortages, or your money might not be worth anything anymore. And this is good to hedge your bets, or to go double down and go all in.
Yep.
And pursue freedom on your own terms.
I mean, to Curtis's point, there's a respite right now, right? So there's time for people who have some money maybe saved up, or the ability to get loans or whatever, to go explore this option while there is a respite before it gets into another pandemic or climate lockdowns that they see are being rolled out in the UK, and all this sort of craziness of our modern geopolitical.
Yeah, you want to pay cash for a house? Better not be in the EU, because it's over $1,000.
And the real value,
come get you.
And real value add is 15 years of knowledge, right, Curtis? Like it's you applied a methodology. And so the value adds in like your ability to filter out the noise, hone in on the signal, and help people then and educate people along the way of how you got to this point over so many years of working on land, visiting so many different farms and different land. I've followed your work for a while. You've you've been all over. You've seen like every single style of farm, I think, in the United States just alone. I mean, it was pretty incredible. But that's the leverage, right? It's the ability, like here's things you will never think about when you're walking in to view a property. Everyone sort of goes and looks as the housework. Is there any sort of major things we have to fix up with the house? Or what about the property? Is it in a flood zone? How are they dealing with basement flooding? Something I had to deal with my old property. Right. So it's built on a hill and it sort of pulled in the center of the hill, where my property was. Things I didn't think I would have to deal with, and of course, So
that's where you can win, because I mean, what we do in this evaluation process, so we go through these 11 layers of scales of permanence, and we assign. So what I did is I kind of created a calculator with it, and so with the scales of permanence,
assign a value to it, or to the
we assign a value, and we use it like a point system. So climate, geography, water, and socioeconomics have the same weight. And so we assigned a multiple to each of those, so that those ones all were assigned a multiple of 2. And so if you assign it a score of 0 through 4, that would be multiplied by 2. Then the next group were 1.5, and then the next group were 1, because they kind of get less important. And so when we evaluated properties, we basically come up with a number score. And so what my hope is, what people will do is that we give you the calculator in the course. I mean, people can figure it out. It's not complicated. The value in the course, again, is in the time that I put in to show all these properties. I have no, IP with the content itself or with the information, but you calculate. And so, like I said, if you want to get organized, use a spreadsheet. Take your 20 best properties, say, that you looked at, that you're all okay. I've looked at all the listings. I looked at them on the map, and they look pretty cool. I think they merit a further look. So then let's take them and put them through the process, then score them, put the score in a spreadsheet, just so you can see what are your top picks, and then just keep looking. And I mean, it's fun. I really enjoy looking for real estate. I find it kind of fun, and it's kind of a thing to geek out on, and kind of, because it's exciting. You imagine, you get creative about what you could do with the property. You
can take all the knowledge that you've learned for all those years, and you can apply to not just the property, but the aspects of the geography around the property and everything, all the other factors. So it's actually a very engaging mental exercise, especially for someone who has the ability to like yourself, right?
Yeah, and the thing that people will find is that they'll actually get better at homesteading inadvertently by looking at more properties, because you'll start to see different ways of doing things. I mean, even in Google Earth alone, you can learn a lot about farming just from Google by looking at people's fields, looking at how people, I see what they did. When you pull the lens back, you're like, okay, I can see why they did that, because of this geographical feature here. You start to kind of like put things together, and things all intersect too. And that's one thing I talk about. We have a number of examples of in the course, is that all these scales of permanence intersect in some way or another. So for example, if you have good topography, meaning you've got a property that has some interesting topography, you got some flat areas, you got some mountainous areas, and so good topography will lend itself to water, because good topography will make water accumulate in valleys, which means that lends itself to more vegetation.
Yeah, better.
And then good topography and good vegetation equals microclimates. Then you get microclimates. So you got a cool area of your property down here by the pond. You've got a really exposed area up on a secondary ridge where you've got some farmland that's nice and exposed. It's really your hot area. You can have different types of microclimates, and that's one of the scales of permanence that we analyze as microclimates. And there's a number of properties we looked at that have great microclimates, and there's some that just don't have them at all. It doesn't mean it's a fail, but microclimates are nice, because if you envision spending a lot of time on your property and doing a number of things on your property, as you would on a homestead, having microclimates is great, because then you have different areas to do different things. Like, so if you've got some vegetation, you've got some trees on your property, hey, You can use those trees to harvest wild edibles, mushrooms, all kinds of things that grow naturally in the forest. You can use it to hunt. You can use it to build a tree fort for your kids. You know, it can be a cool place to hang out in the summertime. You know, and you've got other areas for, you know, the really high, dry, exposed areas where I'm going to put my solar panels, and I'm going to put my gardens here. And as we look at all these properties, that's what I do. Is I kind of riff on them a bit and go, you know, I do this here, and I just kind of broad strokes thinking about how I'd lay it out. But yeah, I think people will kind of get a sense of what they could do, and then the more they do it, then the more, if you use your imagination gets better, right? It's just a muscle like anything else. And the more, and people will find it fun. You start looking at properties and you start going through this process, and you'll see things and you'll look at things in a way you never looked at them before. Once you've seen me show, because like there's some properties we look at where I expose real weak links that weren't noticeable right off the bat, and then you'll be like, oh my goodness, how, you know, and you just saved yourself potentially getting into that situation. Because like I said, I really think that we're going to have, the chances are going to get less and less to get on the land as this whole Great Reset thing starts to roll out more. And you want to get it right the first time. And if I can help people do that, then, you know, I would be very excited to know more that my brothers and sisters were able to get the hell out of the cities and get on some land and be productive and experience the quality of life that we can have out here.
LD, go ahead, put up that graphic that has the URL, grandtheftworld.freedomfarmers.com.
Yeah, you don't have it in your chat on Odyssey or on Rumble. You've got it in the Odyssey one. Oh, no, you don't. No, it's in Rumble. You have it. Or no, or do you?
It's in Rockfin, probably.
I commented on Rumble on the first comment, and then I put I'll put it in Odyssey too, because I don't know if I saw it in the chat one there. I'm looking at it in both of those.
Yeah, I don't have
QR code too.
Oh, you made a QR code for it?
You're into
Sweet.
that. Yeah.
There you go.
The only challenge for some people is they're on the device they would scan it with, and it's on the front screen, and how do they get it back to the camera? But they'll figure it out.
Yeah, they'll
screen capture, save, open it up.
I put it in the chat there too.
Well, thank you for helping us maintain those chats, because it gets streamed to a bunch of places, and we can't watch all the chats at the same time.
Yeah, that's it's crazy I can't even imagine. I have a hard enough time streaming on YouTube, doing all this multiple places. How do you keep up with the chats?
We don't. I pay attention to LD and Tony, and we conduct the show, and somewhere along the way somebody will percolate something through on the control room board, but we just try to stick with it. I appreciate you taking so much time out of your family evening to
incredible value.
Illustrate, articulate, educate us on these things that we need to know about, but we weren't too sure about beforehand. And
well, I'm all about solutions, man.
Yeah, I like this encapsulation of information.
I love that. Yeah. That's such a great resource to have. And at a time when you have people still have the opportunity to own land, to have the opportunity to find a good place to set up as your own that's going to be used for longevity, potentially, you know, for your family down the road. This is just such an invaluable resource, especially when to your point, there's a lot of properties that are under seemingly 500,000, maybe some down as low as 400, 300,000. Like that's very realistic for people, even on like a sort of middle-class income, to be able to imagine. They'd have to leverage it, but it's still something doable. You know,
it is. I mean, think about Europe yourself.
Yep, good.
Well, just think about Europe. I mean, how hard it is to buy property in Europe. For most Europeans, they can't even dream of owning a property. I mean, we still thankfully have the vestige of the American dream to some degree. It's still possible. And and if you make this decision once the right way, you have set up a legacy, as Richard said earlier, for forever. And you know, your grandkids will be thanking you, because we might not have the opportunity to do this for much longer. Who knows? I don't know, but I look at the market conditions and I go, yeah, this is going to get harder and harder for people to do. And right now there's a lot out there, and there's going to be a lot more very soon.
It's true. It's true. And it's better to be prepared and not need it than need it and not be prepared.
Exactly.
So thanks for helping us take those steps in the light direction,
Appreciate it
Curtis,
very
as
much.
you always do, purveying value of substantial and meaningful nature appropriate to everyone's living situations out there. Because if you're in a rental right now, you might need to know this stuff to get out of that rental situation later. So thanks for the contribution of time. And
my pleasure, guys.
Let's catch up soon. grandtheftworld.freedomfarmers.com is the site. And I appreciate you putting us on the early bird list for this. And everyone here who's interested will be good early adopters of your offering.
Awesome. I hope so. Thanks a lot, guys.
Right on.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much.
Curtis.
Okay, have a
Peace.
good night.